All right, get ready because today we are going to be taking a deep dive into Alain de Botton's Essays in Love.
Oh, yes.
It's part novel, part philosophical exploration
Yeah,
of the messy, often hilarious realities of romance, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's de Botton at his most witty and insightful,
Yeah.
I think, weaving in observations on love with references to everyone,
Yeah.
from Aristotle to Groucho Marx.
It's amazing. And we're going to try to unpack all of that stuff.
Yeah.
From those heart-stopping first encounters
Yeah.
to the anxieties of actually being in a relationship.
Wow.
And of course, the inevitable sting of heartbreak.
Of course he
But,
is.
but here's the thing. De Botton doesn't just recount his own love life.
Right.
He dissects it. He uses
He analyzes it.
as a lens to
Yeah.
examine those universal questions we
Yeah.
all have about love,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. I mean, he's brutally honest, sometimes painfully so, about his own vulnerabilities and shortcomings.
Yes, exactly. And that's what makes it so relatable. He's not offering any, easy answers.
Right.
Or pretending to have it all figured out.
No.
So let's jump right in. The book opens with de Botton meeting Chloe on a plane.
Okay.
It's this chance encounter, one that he calculates had a probability of 1 in 989,727 of happening.
Think about that for a second. It's such a tiny chance, yet it happened.
I know, it's crazy.
And that speaks to our tendency to romanticize those chance encounters, to see destiny at play.
Exactly. We crave those meet-cute stories. We want to believe it wasn't just random.
Yeah.
De Botton even admits to feeling this pull towards Chloe, finding her adorable despite her flaws.
He's completely smitten, blinded by that initial rush of infatuation. He talks about her unfinished sentences, her quirky taste in earrings, even her luggage veering wild and to the right, as charming. It's classic idealization, wouldn't you say?
Totally, yeah. He's projecting this perfection onto her, ignoring those flaws as we often do in the early stages of love.
Yeah.
It's almost a way of escaping our own insecurities by creating this perfect image of the other person.
Right. It raises the question, though, how much of that idealization is a defense mechanism?
Mm-hmm.
Are we more attracted to the potential we see in someone rather than who they actually are?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads us to those hilarious early attempts
Yes.
de Botton makes to connect with Chloe, right?
Yeah.
He forgets her number, calls a funeral parlor by mistake,
Oh.
misses her at the airport.
Oh.
And then there's that art gallery day where he pretends to love a painter he's never even heard of.
Oh, it's almost painful to read, but it's so real. We've all been there trying to present this perfect version of ourselves, even if it means fudging the truth a little.
Yeah.
Remember the chocolate cake incident?
Oh, yeah. He despises chocolate, but pretends to love it just to impress her.
Exactly.
It's a perfect example of that tension between authenticity and performance. How much do we compromise ourselves to be accepted?
That's right. De Botton seems to struggle with that throughout the book. He changes his food preferences, hides parts of his personality, all to fit into Chloe's world.
And that kind of ties into a fascinating concept that he introduces, Marxism in love.
Right.
Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
It's a provocative term, but it essentially boils down to this.
Mm-hmm.
We idealize people as long as they don't love us back.
Right.
The moment that love is reciprocated, the bubble bursts.
So you're saying that being loved can actually make us less attracted to someone.
It's not that simple, but it's more about the way reciprocation forces us to confront our own flaws and insecurities. We're no longer in control of the narrative.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
And he illustrates this with the story about his teenage love, Sophie,
Right.
who only approved of his favorite jumper after he refused to change it for her.
Exactly. It's
Uh-oh.
like we need that pushback, that resistance to maintain our idealized image of ourselves.
Yeah. So what does this mean for us? Have we ever felt less attracted to someone once they started showing interest? Maybe it's not about them, but about our own insecurities getting in the way.
That's something worth reflecting on.
Yeah.
And as the relationship progresses, those cracks in the idealized image start to show.
Yeah.
The initial harmony fades, and those individual differences, those false notes, as de Botton calls them, begin to emerge.
Like the infamous shoe argument.
Yes.
He describes those shoes in excruciating detail. Platform sole, high collar, a bow, stars, ribbons, the works.
It's amazing.
And he absolutely hates them.
It might seem trivial, but it highlights a crucial question.
Yeah.
How do we navigate those inevitable clashes of taste in any relationship?
Right. We all have our preferences, our quirks, or things that drive our partners crazy.
Right.
But is it about trying to change the other person or finding a way to coexist with those differences?
That's the question.
And de Botton kind of suggests that we often fall into the trap of illiberalism in love. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so he's playing on the political concept, but applying it to relationships. It's about that tendency to try and mold our partners into our ideal, even if it means criticizing or fixing them.
So it's not just about accepting their flaws, but accepting their differences, even when those differences clash with our own values or tastes.
Exactly, and that can be really challenging.
It's a fine line to walk. And de Botton takes us on a trip to Spain with him and Chloe, where things take kind of an unexpected turn. Chloe falls ill with anhedonia.
Right.
Anhedonia, what is that?
It's essentially the fear of happiness.
Wait, the fear of happiness. Why would anyone be afraid of being happy?
It seems paradoxical,
Who does?
but it reflects a fear of fully embracing joy.
Yeah.
Maybe because it feels fragile, undeserved, or like it can't possibly last.
Have you ever felt that way? Like
Yeah.
uncomfortable or anxious during moments of intense happiness? I mean, I think there's got to be something deeper going on there.
It's definitely worth pondering. And after the Spain trip, doubts start to creep into de Botton's mind. There's that awkward encounter at the architectural exhibit where Chloe praises Will's work, and de Botton becomes fixated on him as a rival.
Oh, so that insecurity starts to erode the trust and intimacy they've built. It's kind of a turning point, and unfortunately, things are about to get even messier.
And this is where de Botton takes us to Paris, you
Yeah.
know, for their anniversary trip.
Right.
But instead of this romantic getaway, it kind of becomes
Yeah.
this breeding ground for his insecurities
Yeah.
and what he calls romantic terrorism.
Romantic terrorism. That's a pretty loaded term. What does he mean by that?
Right. So he's basically describing those like passive-aggressive behaviors
Yeah.
that we sometimes,
Yeah.
resort to in relationships, right?
Mhm.
So like losing the hotel key, sulking, refusing to communicate openly.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about using emotional manipulation to try and get attention and reassurance.
So it's kind of like a form of control, but
Yeah.
disguised as vulnerability.
Exactly. And it's totally counterproductive, just like,
Yeah.
actual terrorism. He even draws parallels
Wow.
between the two, highlighting the illogical means of achieving a goal.
Makes you wonder if, have we ever resorted to these tactics in our own relationships? I mean, it's uncomfortable to admit, but we've probably all been guilty of it at some point.
Yeah.
Like, what are healthier ways to express those needs and frustrations?
Right. And that's a key takeaway from this section, I think. De Botton doesn't shy away from exposing his own flaws, which forces us to confront those tendencies in ourselves.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
And the Paris trip kind of culminates in this, heartbreaking confession on
Yeah.
the plane ride home.
Right.
Chloe admits to seeing Will, and that's,
The end.
the end of their relationship.
Yeah, it's a really painful moment, but de Botton handles it with this kind of mix of sadness and a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
He acknowledges the pain of loss,
Yeah.
but also suggests that there's potential for growth and self-discovery in heartbreak.
Chloe even writes him a letter where she
Mhm.
says, "You'll always be beautiful to me."
It's a reminder that even in the midst of a breakup, there can be tenderness and a recognition of the beauty that was shared.
Yeah, that's a good point. But de Botton doesn't sugarcoat the aftermath. He describes the raw, messy reality of heartbreak,
Yeah.
the despair, the anger, even a near-suicide attempt with vitamin C tablets. It's darkly humorous, but it also kind of points to the depths of despair that heartbreak can induce.
He doesn't hold back. He oscillates between self-pity, anger, and, desperate attempts to reclaim a sense of self. It's a relatable, albeit uncomfortable, portrayal of what it means to grieve the loss of a relationship.
Yeah, and there's that scene in the hotel room where he overhears Chloe and Will together.
Oh, gosh. Talk about adding insult to injury.
It's brutal, but it reflects the reality that, healing is rarely a linear process.
Right.
There are setbacks, moments of intense pain, and a lot of messy emotions to work through. So what does de Botton kind of teach us about coping with heartbreak?
Yeah.
How do we find meaning and growth in those experiences?
Well, he describes a slow, gradual process of letting go.
Mm-hmm.
The memories fade, and he begins to reclaim his life, rediscovering the city, the objects, and the activities he once shared with Chloe, but now on his own terms.
It's like he's detaching from the past and kind of rebuilding his sense of self.
Yeah.
But that takes time, and it's not always easy.
Absolutely. And that leads us to one of de Botton's, I think, most insightful distinctions, the difference between mature and immature love.
This feels like a crucial concept, especially after witnessing de Botton's own struggles with immaturity and his relationship with Chloe.
Yeah.
So how does he define these two types of love?
He suggests that mature love is grounded in realistic expectations, acceptance, and mutual respect. It's about recognizing that your partner is a separate individual with their own flaws, needs, and desires.
Whereas immature love is fueled by idealization, drama, and emotional extremes. It's about possessiveness, control, and a need for constant validation.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily tied to age either. We can all find ourselves caught in patterns of immature love, regardless of how old we are or how much experience we have with relationships.
So what does it take to cultivate that mature, lasting love that de Botton describes?
It requires a willingness to let go of those idealized images, to see our partners for who they truly are, and to accept them, flaws and all.
And that brings us to another fascinating concept de Botton explores: confirmation. He argues that we need other people to help us define ourselves and achieve self-consciousness.
He uses the analogy of an amoeba, this single-celled organism that doesn't have a fixed shape. Our sense of self is similar in that it takes shape through our interactions with others.
So you're saying we can't truly know ourselves without the reflection of others?
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Our identity is constantly evolving based on how others perceive us and how we perceive ourselves in relation to them.
It makes sense when you think about how important it is to feel seen and understood by those we love.
Right.
De Botton even points out those little details, the idiosyncrasies
Right.
that make someone unique, right? He talks about the way Chloe would say certain words, her habits, her expression, all those things that make her, her.
It's about moving beyond those surface-level qualities and really understanding the nuances of another person. It's a process of discovery, both of the other person and of ourselves.
But that kind of deep knowing can be both liberating and terrifying.
Absolutely, because it requires vulnerability, a willingness to let someone see us fully, flaws and all.
Yeah.
And that's not always easy.
No, definitely not. De Botton also emphasizes the role of shared experiences in building intimacy, right?
Yes.
He talks about witnessing a dead body with Chloe.
It was a traumatic experience, but it created a bond between them. It's those moments that disrupt our routines and allow us to see things with heightened sensitivity that can truly deepen a relationship.
He also talks about smaller, more mundane experiences.
Right.
Like grocery shopping or sharing inside jokes.
Right. It's about creating a shared history. A world that only the two of you inhabit.
And that shared world becomes even more important when we kind of consider the limitations of language when it comes to expressing love.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
He actually struggles with this, right?
He does.
He talks about the inadequacy of saying, I love you, how the word itself feels worn out and cliche.
Right.
He wants to find a more unique and authentic way to express his feelings for Chloe.
Right.
And his solution is to tell her that he marshmallows her.
It's quirky, I'll give him that. But it speaks to a desire for a language that feels personal and true. A language that captures the essence of our feelings in a way that traditional expressions can't.
It's interesting, but even the most inventive declarations of love can't prevent those doubts and insecurities from creeping in, right? De Botton's suspicions about Chloe's fidelity resurface, and he becomes increasingly preoccupied with Will, the architect friend.
There's that tense dinner scene where he grills Will about his relationship status, and you can feel the jealousy and anxiety simmering beneath the surface. It's a reminder that even when we try to bury our doubts, they often find a way to surface.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost. The more we focus on those negative thoughts, the more likely they are to manifest.
And it ties back to that fear of happiness we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Could it be that we sabotage our own happiness because we're afraid of its fragility?
That's a fascinating question. Why do we sometimes resist those moments of joy and connection?
Maybe it's a defense mechanism,
Yeah.
a way of protecting ourselves from potential pain. But it also prevents us from fully experiencing the beauty and depth that love has to offer.
It's in this state of like heightened anxiety and suspicion that de Botton really starts to unravel. He describes his descent into what he calls this Jesus complex.
Oh, wow.
Can you unpack that a little? What does he mean by that?
It's a fascinating, albeit slightly disturbing coping mechanism, right? He essentially turns Chloe's rejection into evidence of her shallowness
Uh-huh.
and his own inherent greatness.
So it's a way of kind of protecting his ego and avoiding the pain of, feeling inadequate.
Exactly. It's a distortion of reality, but it allows him to maintain a sense of superiority in the face of rejection.
It speaks to that, human need to make sense of loss, to find a reason
Yeah.
why things didn't work out. And de Botton doesn't shy away from exploring those darker aspects of love. He really dives deep into the psychology of breakups, examining the devastation, the anger, the self-blame, all those raw emotions that we try to, suppress.
Right.
He even grapples with the philosophical implications of heartbreak.
Yeah.
He discusses the concept of
Yeah.
negative liberty in the context of love.
Right. The idea being that while we have a duty not to harm others,
Right.
we can't be forced to love them. It's a painful truth,
Yeah.
but a necessary one. We can't control other people's feelings no matter how much we might want to.
And that kind of raises questions about the morality
Yeah.
of love and rejection. Can we equate loving with goodness and indifference with evil?
De Botton doesn't really offer any easy answers here.
Right.
He challenges us to think critically about these complex issues, highlighting the inherent selfishness of love. We want to be loved, we need to be loved, but those desires often come at the expense of others.
He then describes the slow, agonizing process of forgetting. He talks about how the external world remains unchanged, this constant reminder of his loss.
Right, those familiar places, objects, even smells
Yeah.
can trigger a flood of memories, bringing the pain rushing back. It's like he's haunted by the ghost of his relationship with Chloe.
And that makes moving on even more challenging. He has to actively reclaim his space, his routines, his life.
It's a reminder that forgetting is not a passive process. It requires a conscious effort to detach from the past and move forward.
But de Botton eventually finds a way to do just that. He starts to reflect on the nature of love itself, drawing on the ideas of philosophers and writers throughout history. He even imagines Emma Bovary on the therapist's couch, trying to unpack her romantic masochism.
It's a brilliant way of bringing these philosophical concepts to life. He's not just lecturing us, he's weaving them into the narrative, showing us how they play out in real life.
Yeah. So what does it all mean? What are the key takeaways from this deep dive into essays in love? What wisdom can we, glean from de Botton's messy and relatable journey?
Well, he offers us a framework for understanding the stages of love, from those intoxicating early days of idealization to the inevitable emergence of false notes and the challenges of compatibility. He encourages us to examine our own relationship patterns, to ask ourselves what kind of love we aspire to, and to confront those uncomfortable truths about ourselves that love often reveals.
He also highlights the importance of authenticity, of finding a balance between compromising for the sake of the relationship and staying true to ourselves. And perhaps most importantly, he reminds us that heartbreak, while painful, can be a catalyst for growth and self-discovery.
De Botton doesn't offer any easy answers,
Right.
but he challenges us to think critically about love, to question our assumptions, and to strive for relationships that are both passionate and enduring.
And ultimately, he leaves us with this, sense of hope.
Yeah.
He shows us that it's possible to heal from heartbreak,
Yes.
to reclaim our lives, and to emerge, stronger on the other side.
De Botton's exploration of love is messy, honest, and thought-provoking. It's a reminder that love is a journey, not a destination.
And by understanding its complexities, we can navigate its challenges with more awareness and create relationships that are both fulfilling and authentic.
So we'd love to hear your thoughts on this deep dive. What resonated with you?
Yeah, share your insights and experiences on social media using #TheDeepDive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the complexities of life and love.